You are now listening to the Purple Fox Podcast.
There is this extremism, and both the left and the right have become militant in their actions nowadays, with these extreme views of this is my party, this is my belief. If you're slightly in opposition to this, you are now ostracized and considered to be a member of the opposition.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kevin C. Eze, once again, your host of the Purple Fox Podcast. And today we are taking a look at the fascism of the culture war duopoly. In the foxhole with me today, I have Mr. Andrew Garcia. He is a language student, Army veteran, and a University of San Francisco graduate with a focus in political science. Mr. Andrew Garcia, welcome to the foxhole.
How's it going, Kevin? Just call me Andy. It's much easier.
Cool. So let me set up a bit of a frame for you around our current topic. So it's no secret that our current politics has been infiltrated by the culture war phenomenon, from the national level all the way to what are usually nonpartisan school boards. I once thought that it would be possible to engage politically in the national discourse, speaking only to the substance of policy alone, avoiding the culture war bickering and staying above the muck. But what I've come to realize is that this battle that ultimately boils down to ways of being, living, and existing in the world is truly here to stay, at least for the time being. So we'll dive into detail later, but I just want to ask, how do you feel about the culture war in general? Like, what does anything good come out of it, in your opinion?
In my opinion, no. I can't say, well, that's not true. I think like the thing that is good that has come out of it is that a lot of people, like you yourself said, that you thought politics was once this way, and that the way that we engage arguments and that the way that we would engage with each other would be on this educated battlefield, this idea of how we handle these intense subjects, of our laws and our international politics, as well as our local politics in our government systems. But I think the thing that is good that has come out of all this negativity is the fact that it's highlighting that that's not really how it works. And it's currently has taken over, and maybe has been taking over for quite some time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think my main problem with the culture war is how disingenuous people get when they dive into those topics and those issues. It's like all of a sudden there's like this inability for them to see their own blind spots. They jump into it and then they pick a side, and it's like gung ho all the way. There's very little nuance around it, which is honestly my issue with many things these days. But that willful ignorance gives way to like an actionable political tactic that, or many of those actionable political tactics that are somewhat fascist in my eyes. Just the kind of things we've seen the left try to do to the right, and then in its inverse, what the right tries to do to the left, and it's like a back and forth, a pong game, if you will. And like I said, both liberals and conservatives are guilty of this accusation. And now I use the term fascist, knowing how charged that term can be, as well as how overused and misconstrued it's been in the last few years. So for the audience, here's some context around the term fascism. Merriam-Webster defines fascism as a political philosophy, movement, or regime such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. I'm sure that sounds familiar to some people. The Encyclopedia Britannica states, although fascist parties and movements differed significantly from one another, they had many characteristics in common, including extreme militaristic nationalism, contempt for electoral democracy and political and cultural liberalism, a belief in natural social hierarchy and the rule of elites, and the desire to create a Volksgemeinschaft, which is German for people's community, in which individual interest would subordinate to the good of the nation. Now, Mussolini himself, the father of fascism, says, quote, the citizen in the fascist state is no longer a selfish individual who has the antisocial right of rebelling against any law of the collectivity. The fascist state, with its corporative conception, puts men in their possibilities into productive work and interprets for them the duties they have to fulfill. Does this framing for you of the term fascism sound like how you've been hearing it used over the last few years?
Yeah. I just kind of want to add, because when you had told me the topic and you said what to read, just to kind of get a broad stroke and understanding like what you laid the framework for your viewers and or listeners rather. The thing that I really saw highlighted the most was that the wording that they were using online, with what most people will use will be like a Wikipedia or a Google search or things like this, is that it says an extreme right view attacking anything to be considered Marxism, liberalism, or socialism. So it really, the words that they were using on what most of your people will most of the people today, not your people in particular, like your viewers, but I mean, most of the people today will look up, they will simply just see that quick little jacket that you see underneath every Google search saying that it's right versus left, and that it's an extreme right view about race, nationalism, and a militaristic movement. And that Mussolini and Hitler are attributed to being the fathers of the fascist movements within their own within the birth of this time frame, even though that this was a philosophy written by an Italian that Mussolini himself adopted and then gave birth to, and Hitler also ran off with it. But to answer your question, yes, there is this extremism, and both the left and the right have become militant in their actions nowadays, with these extreme views of this is my party, this is my belief. If you're slightly in opposition to this, you are now ostracized and considered to be a member of the opposition, you know and it doesn't matter if you're right or you're left. If you're on the right but maybe you're not religious, then all of a sudden they're assuming that you're part of the left. If you're on the left and maybe you think that we have a constitutional right to bear arms, boom, all of a sudden now you're back on being a baby killer and everything else that they want to call you, and you can no longer have this nuance, as you say. There's no more this I can have mixed point of views. It has to be this extreme, you are us or you are against us. And that's been between the both, and it's been going on since wokeism has made such a huge appearance in culture and in the media recently. How it's reached this fever pitch, this all-time high.
Right. Very, very well said. It's interesting you brought up wokeism. I want to point you to this Political article by Zach Stanton written about a year ago entitled How the Culture War Could Break Democracy. So Stanton is having this discussion with University of Virginia professor James Davidson Hunter about his book Culture Wars, written in the 1990s, and asking him a series of questions about how the war has evolved over the years. In one of the opening paragraphs, Stanton quotes Professor Hunter, who says, quote, democracy, in my view, is an agreement that we will not kill each other over our differences, but instead we'll talk through those differences. And part of what's troubling is that I'm beginning to see signs of the justification for violence, says Hunter, noting the insurrection on January 6th when a mob of extremist supporters of Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to overthrow the results of the 2020 election. Professor Hunter goes on, quote, culture wars always precede shooting wars. They don't necessarily lead to a shooting war, but you never have a shooting war without a cultural war prior to it. Because culture provides the justification for violence. What kind of response do those quotes trigger in you?
Well, it triggers in me what we're seeing now, right? What we're seeing right now in America, especially, if we just want to focus on this country, where it's you 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 cannot say anything anymore in regards with this movement of wokeism that is considered to be uh it's like it's almost like I can't just, for instance, like Little Nas, like I don't, I don't really listen to rap or hip hop all that much. Nothing against it. I just, you know, but if I don't like his music and I say I think his music is trash, I'm immediately written off as a homophobe, as I get all these phobes thrown at me. I get all these extreme terms thrown
Right,
at me.
all the labels are ready.
All the labels,
Already.
and they're not just said to me, but they're said to me with extreme prejudice and violence. Like these people want to commit violent actions towards me, or they're threatening violent actions towards me because of my view of this artist music. And I didn't even, and I'm from an era when you can say very different words, and I had to like really adapt with the times and be like, oh, I can't use the R word or the F word or this word or that word. And I can understand that because everybody deserves respect, but at the same time I should be allowed to disagree with what I want to disagree with and have it be nothing more than just simply that's not my taste or this is not my style. um you know
Right.
and
It seems as if you don't agree with a certain trend or like uh, a stream of thought adopted by a certain majority, if they're even a majority, sometimes they're not even a majority. It's just the majority of those surrounding you, that they've automatically made up their decision about who you are, what you believe, how they should treat you, and there's very little wiggle room out of that pigeonhole.
yes, yes, that's exactly it. Exactly, the moment that you don't share the exact ideology, as these people, and just accept it to be, uh which is what scares me, is that I grew up when critical thinking was encouraged in the classroom, and that's actually what helped me with education in general. It didn't fit so well with my Sunday school lessons in the growing up Catholic, but which I no longer am, because things that you're not allowed to question terrify me, not only as a person, but as an American. It's that we're supposed to be allowed. That's the whole point of our Constitution, of the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, is that it is supposed to allow us the freedom to not only just question each other, but to question our government and their actions, and see who are they benefiting and what for. And the fact that I cannot question anything that is happening right now, even if it's out of ignorance or just out of sheer, like what is happening, like shock factor as what just happened. I'm now all of a sudden written off, and people want to do violence, and that's the thing that scares me, is that people are not willing to have discussions. They just want to go straight to violence. And it goes back to what we're kind of diving into here, where it's like these things are becoming very aggressive. I mean, we saw Will Smith literally assault Chris Tucker because of a simple joke. And, I had made a comment saying, like, okay, we're not too far off. And it was made out of sarcasm, but also out of my disbelief of this dystopia that we're now in, that is now so extreme, that how long before a comedian shoots one of the audience members? And what happened a couple weeks after that happened? Somebody rushed Dave Chappelle on stage, and
Well,
it's
what is interesting, you make a notice of those two examples. Um, what's interesting about those two examples, I think they heavily paid for those breaches. Will Smith maybe not as much as the guy who got stomped out by several people after he tried to charge Dave Chappelle. I don't know why he thought that would go any differently. But yeah, I think Will Smith, for the most part, all his major projects have been canceled. I think he's in India somewhere. I know Red Table Talks haven't even tried to touch any subjects because they don't even want that smoke, So like this, I think the Smith family, uh, it shouldn't have been the whole Smith family because Will Smith chose to act on his own, and it was his actions.
right.
It shouldn't reflect on his whole family, but
And
yeah.
that goes into this extremism that we're talking about, where it's like, look, who who makes these rules? This is why this fascism, or this extremism, and this quote unquote woke culture or cancel culture, terrifies me, because it's unregulated. We already have laws. We are a sovereign nation. We are a democracy
Well, they
that
tried to regulate it with this Ministry of Truth that got shut down very quickly.
exactly. But it's like, if Will Smith would have gone to jail for assault, he would have paid his fine, or did a little bit of jail time, and then that would have been the end of it. But now he's suffering so much more excessively than what he needs to, and it's because of this unregulated cancel culture. This so quick to just jump on board, jump on the bandwagon of hate and extremism, and just be like, you did this, so now you're finished, until an undetermined amount of time. And I think that that's ridiculous. This is not civilized. This is not how we should be behaving as mature, intelligent individuals. That's why we have a rule of law. And it's unfortunate that law is not static. It's not operates in the gray, because law cannot operate in a gray. It has to operate in black and white. You do A, so B, equals your consequence. That's how law works, unfortunately. And when we take law into our own hands, which, when I was looking up the theme, it seemed like this is what the right was doing. The right was, saying, oh, we're going to sit there and we're going to burn these books. We're going to take over these programs. We're going to say these religions are wrong. These things are wrong. It's no longer the right that's doing it. It's now the left, and they're like, okay, if you want to believe that we should have guns, we're going to ban all these guns. We're going to put all these restrictions. If you want to believe in religion, then we're going to ban you from joining the party, and we're going to think that you're ignorant. And it's like, you know what? People should be allowed to believe whatever they want, but they shouldn't be allowed to force it on you. I'm perfectly fine with people having their religion, their religious beliefs. I just don't want to be forced to follow it. I want you to have that lifestyle, but there's a reason why I don't want to live in the Middle East. There's a reason why I moved to a country where Christianity is less than 5% of the total population, because I don't have to succumb to ridiculous religious laws. Where when I lived into Korea and we go into the whole COVID thing, I was at I was at not ground zero, but I was there at the initial outbreak in Korea when one old woman from a religious Christian church, a very select group, because they were trying to distance themselves.
Oh, this is that first church in Seoul.
Right. So
Right.
it's actually not in Seoul. It actually comes from further south,
Okay.
around the Daegu area. And it was like an extreme Christian church, kind of like our version of evangelicals, where they speak in tongues and kind of have like their own. And I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying like, hey, like this is your belief, this is your thing. I'm just saying like this is a very extreme viewpoint of the religion that they have. And their belief system is that prayer will heal their sickness. And so the thing that really baffled me wasn't so much that she was infected, it's that she literally, after being tested positive and put into the quarantine unit of the hospital, was able to just walk out without any supervision or anyone paying attention and attend um, a church group. And in this church, they don't wear masks, they don't wear their glasses, they sit like literally uh, on their knees, or Indian style, or cross leg, and they are like right in each other. And it doesn't matter if you have cancer, it's not just COVID, it's any sickness. They believe that if they do not attend church, that their ailment will not get healed, that they're sick because their belief isn't strong enough. So she went to go get better, and it spread from one into 1,000, and then a
Oh
thousand
my
into
God.
so many, because these people keep their identity secret. This
Wow.
particular church kept their identity secret, and it blew into what it was. Where when I was in Taiwan prior to that, Taiwan actually, and there's documentation, was alerting the U.S. government back in early as November of 2018, sending emails saying, "Hey, there's something novel. We're not sure what it is that's breaking out of Wuhan. It's spreading. It looks pretty nasty. It could be the next SARS. Keep an eye out." And they already started escalating their system. So what Taiwan does is that they learned from SARS, because SARS had destroyed Taiwan. It had destroyed their system. They never encountered anything like it. So after that, they allowed their scientists and their doctors to take over the government, and everything runs through them during these periods where they make the policies, and then all the other government branches break it down and disseminate it to everyone else. So they're like, hey, for education, this is what you guys need to do. This is how you do your stuff. So the Ministry of Education tells all the schools and all the university, from university all the way down to elementary school or preschool, hey, this is how you guys need to run your operations, or maybe you guys shouldn't do this, and so on and so forth. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, like that handles travel and foreigners entering and exiting. This is how they set their guidelines, is through the people who expert in these things. But there's no religious influence. They're not allowing this belief of oh, I can just pray it away, or we need to come together. Or there's this argument of, how come this religion has a prayer channel, and then this religion is being allowed megaphones to have prayer and so on. There's none of this that was happening in the US or in Korea. And it was just simply like, let's let logic and science handle what goes on, and the people will follow suit with it. And let's help the people. Let's not separate this from anything else.
Right.
And that really amazed me, because when I was in Korea, like, nobody really cared. But when you're in Taiwan, before you can enter any building, at this time, and they would scan your temperature, or they would have a machine that would check your temperature, and then they would spray your hands with like 90% alcohol, and make sure that you rub it in, and then they would sit you social distance from other groups, so that way you can still have meals and things can still run on. And they made it accessible for everyone to get the masks and the supplies and the things that they needed to do. And they had apps, and the people were willing to participate in this, so that way the government can do its job, and then the people can work with the government, so that way they can do their job. And yet nobody liked it, nobody was happy about it. I mean, people were annoyed. They wanted to go to their parties and their concerts here. However, they understood that a small sacrifice is required for the greater safety of everyone else, which is something that we seem to have lost in our country, where it's, I'm a victim of this degree and I deserve everyone to bow down to me. It's a game of victimhood, is what I feel that we have. And everyone just gets behind the bigger victim. And then that is the person that's right. And we no longer let our logic or our critical thinking dictate how we handle these situations.
Right. It's like a combination of that loss that you're talking about, and then also like a lessening of that nuance we were speaking of earlier. It's like both of those things combined, that what's the best word for that? Like a purism. It's like a purism for one side with no tolerance for nuance at all. You're either here or you're not here. You're on that side. There's no middle ground. There's no in between middle ground. There's no, there's no deviation from us. If you deviate, you're on the other side. And then coming back to this conversation with James Davidson Hunter, I was very fascinated that this thing was a phenomenon that people were writing about in the 90s, but it makes sense because like he says in this quote, politics is an artifact of culture. This is James Davidson Hunter again. It's a reflection. It's a reflection. Culture underwrites our politics. One, probably the most prevalent way, is to think of it as a political battle over certain kinds of cultural issues like abortion, sexuality, family values, church state issues, and so on. And therefore, the culture war is really about the mobilization of political resources, of people and votes and parties around certain positions on cultural issues. In that sense, a culture war is really about politics. But the bigger story is about the cultures that underwrite our politics and the ways in which our politics become reflections of deeper cultural dispositions, not just attitudes and values that go beyond our ability to reason about them. So this culture underwriting politics, dictating how people feel, the emotional responses, and sometimes they go beyond the ability to reason about them because they're so emotional, visceral. There's such emotional and visceral issues. It's almost like you're attacking their very way of being. To reference how I framed it in the beginning. Um, Stanton goes on to quote Professor Hunter: conservatives see this as an existential threat. This is how Zach
Mhm.
Stanton and Professor Hunter are phrasing this conversation within this article. Obviously, I mean, you can see this kind of heavily liberal tint already within the article, which is why I picked it. Conservatives see this as an existential threat. That's an important phrase. They see it as an existential threat to their way of life, to the things that they hold sacred. So while the earlier culture war really was about secularization, and positions were tied to theologies and justified on the basis of theologies, that's no longer the case. You rarely see people on the right rooting their positions within a biblical theology or ecclesiastical tradition. Nowadays, it's a position that is mainly rooted in fear of extinction. So my question to you is, do you see any blind spots within that argument? Are there any blind spots within that clear to you?
Well, I don't. Like you said, it is very, it is tinted very liberally, um, but it's not wrong. Like when Trump was running for office the first time, he was literally hitting every white male's, you know, uh, uh,
Wet dream.
well, not just dream, but fear.
Right,
He
right. Stoking
closing
them.
borders,
Right, right, right.
blaming immigrants,
Hmm.
like promoting a religion. Like these are literally the greatest hits. That every Republican has been rooting for or going for since this. Like, you want guns, we're going to give you guns. You want jobs, we're going to give you jobs. I'm going to blame China. I'm going to blame, this. I'm going to blame the people that come here and work illegally, even though that we secretly hire them to do all the work, because to pay an American an honest wage is way too expensive. It's literally, this is the only right religion. The only right religion is some type of form of Protestant or Christian values. If you don't have this type of Judeo-Christian or Protestant beliefs, then you're of the wrong religion and you need to get in line. If you don't wear your clothes a certain way, then you know, uh, and that's literally, the fear that these people have is that their way of life is is changing. And what could be contributed as a blind spot to that is not looking at your own position, you know where um where I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's these people are letting, with the left, I'm going to say it's really their emotion versus their logic that is driving their fear. They feel something should be a certain way versus why these things are actually laws, or what these laws actually do uh, for us. And
Well,
that kind of,
it's interesting that you walked into it. You walked into that question on your own, but because my next question was going to be, if that's true, because you say that when that quote to you felt true and resonant.
yeah.
Um, so if that's true, on the other side, what would the left be running from? If on one side the right, the conservatives are running from a sense of extinction, what would you say liberals are running from?
I would say they're running from, uh I mean, I want to say something like victimhood or individuality. Like they're not
Interesting. Uh-huh.
they're not feeling recognized for who they are.
Interesting. Huh.
They want to subsegregate themselves. It's, you can't just be a black man anymore. You have to be like, I am a cis black man, or I am a trans black man, or I am a trans homo, whatever. Like, you have to have your niche,
All the
so that
categories
way,
again. Right.
all the categories, so that way you can get all of the people to jump on your bandwagon whenever something happens. I can't just hit you anymore if we're having a normal fist fight. I'm not saying that we would, but in my era of growing up, and I think maybe similarly to yours, if we couldn't settle things with our words, which maybe we didn't have developed so much, depending on where you grew up, you go outside and you settle things, physically.
Oh, it was definitely
Nowadays,
the
if
same.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
nowadays, if you settle things physically, which is what our government does, it's like, hey, if we cannot settle things politically, we send in the troops, right? Like that's what they do. And so we're not different than that. But now, if it gets to that level, all of a sudden the first thing that everyone wants to know is, oh, okay, so it was brown on black. Was one of them LGBTQ? Was one of them, like, what the richer or poorer? Or they want to start seeing, so that way they can know what side of the argument to jump on. And there's just no logic to it. It becomes so illogical and emotional that it terrifies me, because you can't run a nation on emotions. You need to have some form of structure to base your argument in. And as much as we want individuality, and I do support being proud of your individual, be proud that you're a trans person, be proud that you're homosexual, be proud of being non-binary. I'm not saying, that you should hide from this. And I do think the right is wrong to want to take this away, but I also think the left is wrong to want to highlight this and glorify this. That should be your right to highlight and glorify that. Fly your flag how you want to fly it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also respect
Go ahead.
that you're part of a greater community,
Uh-huh.
and that we are a race of humans and people, and that we need to come together and not be so individualized. And I can hate you simply for no more reason than you're just a person that I fucking hate, and it has nothing to do with any of your special identifiers.
Yeah, one thing that I've been noticing, I completely agree with what you're saying, and one thing that I've been noticing, and I notice it specifically with like liberal outlets, because I listen to all kinds of news. I listen to conservative news, maybe like mid-centrist news, outlets that are like mostly liberal. I hear it on outlets like NPR a lot, because
Mm,
I am a big consumer of NPR. And one thing that's starting to annoy me is this hyper focus on the black race. Like they'll it's like an economic segment. I'm listening to Marketplace, and they're like, the consumer price index is out, or the jobs rate. They're comparing the jobs rate, and they're like, oh, yeah, the jobs rate is at this percentage, and they'll single out, and the black unemployment rate is at so and so, and then it's not like they're going to mention any other races there. They're just talking about maybe because the black unemployment rate is maybe the lowest one, sure, but if you're going to do that, it's almost more respectable to call out all of them so that everyone knows where everything is, and you can see the whole picture. It's almost like you're trying to highlight the disparity, but at the same time, you're making the disparity the only part of the conversation. And you know, I think that's why you see like mass exoduses from like the Latino community and the Asian community from like liberal movements and politics, because it's like, okay, where's our focus? We're also minorities. Is the term minority just dead, or is minority only mean black? You know?
well, look at what happened. I mean, Biden invited, I think, BTS to the White House to
Right,
talk about an anti-Asian hate bill.
right.
You know, I mean, I think I got canceled on Facebook for a long time, but I had this really hot take, and I said, is it karma? Is Asian hate karma for the way that they treat the Black community? Because a lot of Asians would hide behind, white people, or chasing after. Because I see it a lot here in Asia too, where there's so here's something that really needs to be highlighted is that I get treated very differently once my passport gets shown. So in places of government where I show my passport, immediately facial expressions and things become very different. Um, and the thing that's really ironic about BTS and Korea being highlighted is that Korea is very similar to America in its xenophobia and its hatred of anything foreign. Um, and Korea is a great place to listen. I have nothing bad against the Korean people, but I had lived there for 18 months of my life. And um, just the way that they go about things, it's not very welcoming for living or sustainability to outside uh, people. I mean, my ex from Korea, when I was living with her family, her coworkers, her people, and they work for an international company. I don't want to say their name because I don't know if that's allowed or not
Right.
allowed.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's avoid
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that, you know, look, they're an international company that she works for, and um, her boss said, and her mom said, and her friend said the exact same thing essentially. And I'm going to paraphrase it: your partner is dark. He does not speak Korean. He is going to have a very hard time here. You really, really need to work twice as hard to help him, because Korea does not have a Duolingo system. It is, but it's not. Like, you'll see menu names in English like spaghetti, but then everything else is listed in Korean. You know, and it's like what's in the spaghetti is listed in Korean. The way it's made is very Korean. Um, Very similarly, like how we make everyone else's food very Americanized. But the difference is that I don't know how much LA works, but in San Francisco, you know, your public transportation will say things in English, Chinese, and I think Spanish, if I remember correctly
It
from the
started.
last time.
It wasn't so much in the past, but they're starting to catch on to that. It's coming along. Yeah.
So Taiwan operates very similarly, where their public transportation system, at least in the main international city of Taipei, I haven't really traveled much outside of it, but it's not hard to do. Um, it's said in Mandarin, um, traditional Chinese, so Mandarin. It's said in uh, English, Japanese, and Taiwanese. So Taiwanese is its own separate language, different from Mandarin Chinese, but it is set in four different ways. And usually, if you're a very calm and patient foreign person, and you ask somebody very slow and in I mean elementary style English, and I'm not being disrespectful, you have to be understanding that this is another country and you need to speak slower and you need to speak at an elementary level because most people do not speak as we speak. They will help you. They will tell you where to go. They will tell you how to get onto your train, or you know, if you're lost where you can and can't go, they will try and, or somebody will come up and try and help you order if they feel that their English is a little better, just to move things along. Um, and that's something that I never experienced in Korea, where it was very similar to being in America, where it's just kind of like, oh, you don't speak our language? Well, what the hell are you doing here? You know, and it's like, hurry up and figure it out. People don't want to stop out of their day to help you.
Right.
They're like, I'm busy, I'm in a hurry. And that's really funny to me, that you know, these people that treat foreign people in our country who are coming to spend money, live lives, maybe better themselves, you know, contribute to the American economy or the community, you know, taxpayers, legal citizens, the whole thing that the right spills out, you know. It's very funny to me how when you're on the other side of that and these people never really leave the country to experience that, how they wouldn't like it, because I really didn't like it. I really did not enjoy my time in Korea at all. I hated it, and I still do. And it's not a secret in Asia. Everyone knows how Koreans are to other people and how they are in general. And they're just like, oh, I'm surprised. You know, they're more shocked that I lasted as long as I did, you know, because it's not a secret. And when people come to my country, I try my best to help them, you know, and I did. And I see a lot of that belief system here where it comes back to community in Taiwan, where people drive like assholes here, but they don't flip each other off because you're not allowed to. If you publicly flip someone off, you can be arrested, or not arrested. You can be fined for slander. Um, if I talk bad about you on Facebook, and people read it, you can sue me for slander here, for losing face. Um, and also, the thing that people are aware of here is that we are a community. We're a small group of people. So if I talk bad to you, maybe you have the same barber I do, but he knows you better. So now your barber is going to have to pick sides between you and me. Well, he knows you better, so he's going to choose that relation over me, and maybe he's going to magically become very busy all of a sudden. So they're very indirect here. They're not very straightforward or confrontational, but they will become very busy. And then maybe the lady who makes my breakfast is going to know about our disagreement or our fight, and they have better relations with you because you've been here longer. Now all of a sudden I'm being completely ostracized from a community because I went too far with my aggression towards you and the way that I acted. They're not against disagreements. They're not against us having fights. They're just against me shaming you about it, or me talking bad
The
about it.
excesses.
Yeah, the excessiveness
Yeah.
about it. Because what they
Interesting.
understand and what we used to understand in our country was, I can hate you and I can disagree with you, but I do not need to cross this boundary of plastering it all over the internet. And the thing that really reminds me of is kind of what we're talking about, where people just want to highlight that, oh, this person did this. It's like the reverse of that. They're just like, oh my god, this person disagreed with me, I'm going to shame you for disagreeing with me because I have this special identifier. I am an unemployed, like you were saying, I'm an unemployed black man and I fall in this percentage, so I'm going to shame you for being a successful Hispanic person or a successful Asian person, or etc. And I need to exploit this victimhood instead of seeing, well, maybe I'm just not qualified enough. And
Yeah.
that's because we've dealt with both extremes in our country, where
Hmm.
there was a time, and there still is, I'm not saying it hasn't completely stopped, where people just sit there and they see your name, and your name doesn't fit a traditional American name, and you don't dress a specific way, so now all of a sudden you may not get a job. And that's why they had affirmative action hire, if you remember the affirmative action movement.
Yeah. In
And
the
then
80s.
people were what, like just what conservative people do, they find ways to work around the affirmative
Right.
action. I mean, companies make sure that if you're a black Jew, that gives them section 8, title C. I don't know what the actual code is, I'm making it up, but it does give them a different tax benefit. If you're a disabled, they try to find you, because now we're encouraging people to only select the individual victimhood, or the
Based on the benefit
individual
for the company. Right.
for the company,
Right.
and it's no longer because they actually care. and
Who
and our
who is this
our
person? What are their
politics,
merits? Right.
right,
Right.
and our politics are the exact same way.
Right.
And it's frustrating because Biden is not doing well publicly, so he's like, let me bring BTS to the White House, show that I love Asian people and all this other stuff. And yet my Latino brothers and sisters, are still in cages on borders, being, sterilized against their free will, being treated like, you know, uh, not to beat this comparison up, but I think there was a group of people who put people in cages and sterilized them and did experiments on them against their will. And I think we kind of went to war and got rid of that group of people. So
Yeah.
it's a little funny that we're doing that, publicly, and that what did
People.
the black community get? You guys got Juneteenth.
Yeah.
White people finally learned what Juneteenth is, but now they're just going to be putting on daishikis and drinking,
Oh, I
liquor out
hate
of a
it.
gourd.
I really
You know
hate
what
it.
I mean? Like, but where's your guy? Where's our
I want to see
anti-racism?
what this one's gonna look like. I want to see. Oh, I saw. Oh no, there was this company that made a poster. I'm sure they promptly and swiftly took it down. It was like an all white panel that was gonna have some discussion on Juneteenth. They called it a Juneteenth celebration, and there was no color in sight. It was hilarious. I'm sure they were trolled all up and down the internet. But that aside, so that leads me right into this next question, which is what are some things you've learned about humanity in general when it comes to tackling these culture war issues? Just humanity.
Humanity. I mean, just studying history and policy and government. Even at a elementary school level, we love to hate. We love to have an enemy. And if you're, I mean, I grew up in a poor community. And so, I had Black people, I had Mexican people, I had Asian people. But the one thing that I learned is that even amongst those communities, we find ways to hate each other. It's like, oh, you're a little bit more light skinned than me, so you're all of a sudden like white, or like, oh, you think you're fancy because of this, or you make a little more money, or you dress.
There's always another.
We There's
There's always
always a
another.
reason
Yeah.
to hate, and it's not just a current issue. It's not a matter of being left or right, or being in the middle. It's something about the human race as humanity. For some reason, we cannot be at peace with what we have and who we are, you know and I'm guilty of it. I'm not above it. I am certainly not preaching or talking down to anyone. I mean, recently, before I recently got engaged, I was kind of dating somebody, and I saw her new part. I kind of did that little stalker thing that we all do. We're like, oh, who's this new person? And the first thing that my mind went to was like, oh, he's a white dude from a middle class place that likes to play around with samurai swords and thinks he's a like white Japanese ninja here in Taiwan. I'm like, why aren't you in Japan? And I said, of course you love him because white people love Asian guys. I mean, Asian women love white guys more than they give anything else a chance. And I had to say, and my mind went to that place, and that was like the first place that I went to, and I was like, wait, why are you taking it there? Like, look at things at the surface. What do you see? And I said, oh, their Instagram pages read the exact same way. They're nothing but hiking pictures of them and their friends doing stuff that you did not like to do. They're both extremely conservative, which is something that you're not. You're very liberal. They come from proper homes, so they both come from middle class. So they're the thing that really is the issue is that they have too much commonality, and you're too much of an outsider to that commonality for someone who doesn't have the training or the openness to accept the difference to be in a relationship with. And that was really ultimately all it was. Everything else is just the story. It's just that pain or that hurt, that emotional part
Right.
inside of us that overrides our logic and our common sense and doesn't allow us to see things for what they truly are. And I think that we're all guilty of it, but we should be evolved. I mean, we're in the year
What?
2022.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I was just gonna say. I mean, you with that example, you fell into the stream for a bit, but then you took that step back, and I commend you for that because most people don't take that second step. You actually were able to take a step back and say, "Oh, wait, there's a lot of commonalities between them," and I was the outsider in that factor, in that scenario, and able to see what most people in our society don't see. They don't take that second step. They go right in with the hate, and then they let that drive the course. Yeah. So I do that's I think that's what's missing in politics today. I think it's that second step. That
The system,
you
but the
know.
system isn't designed for the second step, because it's like you said earlier in this discussion, where culture determines what we turn into politics. I mean, you can watch that old Schoolhouse Rock where it's like, I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. But what makes something a bill? Well, grassroots, right? Grassroots movements. We want these rights. It's why comedians like Dave Chappelle, I truly find to be so masterful, because what he does is that he talks about how rights for Black people have not really made much progress. But the moment that you put these people that are in these special categories, because they have members of, you know, the white race, for a lack of a better term, and his argument is really with white people, not with,
Right.
LGBTQ or anything
It
like.
flew over a lot of people's heads.
It flew over a lot of people's
It flew over a
heads.
lot of people's heads.
And he
Yeah.
even
It really
said
did.
very directly
It
in
really did.
his last show, I hate white people. It's white people that I have a problem with. It's not anything else. He's like, I love this community. My friends are a part of, he's like, I love them. And I just think that it's unfair that me as a black man or other black people do not have any rights. And that's why I said that thing in vain about Asian hate in these bills, where it's like, pretty much everybody but black and brown people are getting laws passed to protect them, and that's because the current climate in society is not there, which is the thing that scares me, where it's, why are we in the year 2022 and yet black and brown people aren't having the same representation that all these other groups are having? Why is it that people that claim to be woke or culturally aware or whatever are not aware that politics, movie programs, networks, Hollywood, whatever, do not really give a flying, about what you identify as. They just care what's going to put profits in their pocket at the end of the day. So they will fake pretend to support your cause or needs, or they will put as many people of your community into movies to the point, or TV shows to the point where it doesn't bankroll, it doesn't roll, it doesn't last that long. And viewership will go down and things will go away, and then they will go back to what they're doing. Because the thing about humanity is that for some reason we need to feel special, we need to feel hatred towards someone else, we need to have these things where we cannot just simply be, hey, you know what, you're a person, I'm a person, I have value, you have value, they're different values, they're different systems, we can exist with each other. We don't have that. And because we don't have that, politics will never have that. And politics will always pick up whichever has the larger number of people that will support them, that will get them into office, that will get them that payday, that will get them into that position that they can advance even further.
Well, okay. Finally, so let me ask you this last question.
Okay.
Saying that, what is your best guess conclusion on how this ends in the future? Or do you think this culture war phenomenon is always going to be attached to our politics here on out, from here on out?
I so number one, I think that this culture war phenomenon has always been happening, and it's not just a US problem, because like I said, I've been living in Asia since 2018, so I've been traveling around from different countries,
Now,
and
I
there's
really I appreciate the international tint you brought to this conversation. It's been really fascinating, to be honest. But yeah,
yeah.
continue.
So I think I should have majored in sociology instead of politics, because I tend to like that more. But the thing that I've noticed is that every group, every place has an oppressed set of people, uh, and they tend to be the indigenous people or the impoverished people. So here in Asia, the people that are hated the most are people from Southeast Asia. That's your Filipinos, your Thai, your Vietnamese. They actually have the heaviest restrictions on immigration and travel throughout the rest of Asia, because they're the immigrant class that comes in and does your factory work, your labor work. They're the ones who get blamed, just like how Hispanics and Black people and poor white people get blamed for why the economy is bad in our country. It's literally the same argument, but you just switch. You know, you just change A, B, and C for what the argument is, and it's the same argument. So I don't think that there has ever been a time where we truly haven't hated somebody or this hasn't been an issue. I just think that the way that it's going about it now is that it's become so volatile between both sides. Um, and the where I see it going is that we're waiting for this defining moment, uh, like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand that led us into that Great World War, the second one. We're waiting for oh no, that was the first one. Anyway, the point is that we're waiting for that thing to light the keg. And I really think it's going to be determined on the 2024 election, because my theory is that Trump is going to get reelected.
Well, you don't think it was Ukraine? You don't think Ukraine was the matchstick?
No, because look at, like, realistically, Russia's not hurting as much as the media is making it out to be. Like the little things that we've done to Russia, Russia's still rich. Russia's still causing war. I mean, the reason why people don't realize we haven't done anything is because if America actually sent troops into Russia, it's going to trigger a world war. If any other country besides Ukraine and Russia fight this, which is very unfortunate, because there's that thin line where I can give you airplanes, I can give you bombs, I can give you guns, but the moment that I give you human beings is the moment that this becomes an international war. And then you get your buddies, and then I get my buddies, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're back for World War III in Europe.
Right. The most immediate allies rallying to Russia, probably India and China.
And if India and China go in, then America is going to lobby for everyone else who has major debt to China, Australia, Africa, to say, hey, fight the hand that feeds you, because with our support as the US and our strongest military power right now that we like to claim, because we don't have healthcare for our people, but we can definitely put a cruise missile up their ass, if you fight with us, you will win, and then you won't have debt, and then China will pay you money for killing your people and doing stuff to you, just like we did to Germany, at the end of World War I, and we saw how that Treaty of Versailles led to World War II. So I really think that history is bound to repeat itself, but I'm not sure. My theory is that it's going to have to do with who enters the White House in the next election, which is why I'm staying where I'm at for now, because I want to stay away from it all and just watch it from the sidelines and run as much as I can, because I'm not going back to war. It's not fun.
Well, Andy, my man, it has been great. This is a wonderful conversation. Do you have any plugs or offerings for the audience?
No, I'm not selling or doing anything. So, but thank you so much for the opportunity. It was great talking to you, and I appreciate you having me on your program.
No problem, man. So this has been another episode of the Purple Fox Podcast. This is Kevin Eze, your host, thanking Mr. Andy Garcia for joining us. And this is One for the Books, signing out.